We live in an age where the power of the image molds the global perception of the U.S. throughout the world more so than any politician ever could. And Hollywood is the largest and most influential purveyor of those images in the history of the world. But are they projecting the images that could heal divides and repair our good standing and win back the hearts and minds of those whose perception of us have dramatically been tainted? Those are the questions posed by Mike Medavoy and Nathan Gardels in their new book, American Idol After Iraq, Competing for Hearts and Minds in the Global Media Age. This fascinating, informative, and important work is a must-read, and you can purchase it now by clicking on the book's front cover icon on our homepage. Mike Medavoy has had one of the most impressive careers in Hollywood for the past 4 decades. As Senior Vice President of Production at United Artists, he shepherded such projects as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Annie Hall, and Rocky. As co-founder of Orion Pictures, he helped bring to the screen films like Platoon, Amadeus, Dances with Wolves, and Silence of the Lambs. And as chairman of TriStar Pictures, his winning streak continued with Philadelphia, Terminator 2, and Sleepless in Seattle. In his current position as co-founder and chairman of Phoenix Pictures, he's delivered movies like Malick's Thin Red Line and Foreman's The People vs. Larry Flint, among many others. I could go on and on, Jerry, but the show isn't long enough.
Yeah, it isn't.
Nathan Gardels is the editor of New Perspectives Quarterly, Global Viewpoint, and Nobel Laureates Plus. His writings have appeared in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, as well as dozens of international publications. And his previous books include At Century's End, Great Minds Reflect on Our Times, and The Changing Global Order. He is one of the world's most respected and renowned columnists on global affairs. It is a tremendous privilege to welcome Mike Medavoy and Nathan Gardels to Movie Geeks United. Gentlemen, hello. How are you?
Hello.
Well,
Can you hear me?
Hello.
We're in good shape. I think Nathan.
Cool.
Yeah, I think Nathan just got off a plane from Japan.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't speak for how well he is.
I'm pretty well.
Welcome,
the Michael
gentlemen.
Jackson fever from across the Pacific.
I really appreciate you taking time out to do this for us
We
today.
really do. We really do.
Thank you.
Incidentally, I don't know if you know, but I was Hal Ashby's agent.
You were, and
Yeah.
you had involvement with Bound for Glory?
Well, Bound for Glory and Coming Home.
And you wanted to mount several projects for him later on in his career with Diane Keaton, I think I had read something.
Yeah, but Coming Home, I thought both Bound for Glory and Coming Home were wonderful experiences for me, and of course Shampoo, where I was his agent, was an interesting experience.
What an amazing talent that was! What an amazing films.
Yeah. Anyway,
this book is fantastic. I urge everyone out there to read it. It's a very valuable book. And I can't wait to talk to you about it. Mike, you've often said that you learned about America from the movies. I know that you grew up in Shanghai and Chile, and I'm wondering what the movies taught you about America and how you think that differs from the way kids in those regions of the world view America through the movies of today.
Well, I think I don't think they view it that differently. I mean, that was the point, and I think that was the thing that both Nathan and I talked about. I came to America expecting it to be, like a movie set, with the refrigerators and all the stuff that you couldn't get anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And it obviously all the dreams that I had came true in a very kind of strange way, because the fantasy became reality to me.
Right.
But I thought it was important for others to understand that that's a great medium to not only deal with that, but to view our our foreign policy and how other people view us.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And there really is. I don't think we tend to live in such a bubble here in America. A lot of us do. That we don't realize the global reach of our films and our media. Nathan, could you give me some examples of how far that influence reaches?
Yeah, well, kind of in response partly to the question you asked, Mike, how things looked once and how they might look different, depending on different audiences, because what we do in the book is we try to look at how American mass culture refracts differently for different people where they sit in the world.
Yes.
For example, I would say at the height of America's mass cultural power back towards the end of the Cold War, there was this famous radical Regis Debray, a pal of Fidel and Che, who said there's more power in blue jeans and rock and roll than the entire Red Army. Also today, if you're a shuttered Saudi housewife sitting there watching satellite TV, you can watch Oprah, and that has a kind of a subversive influence, on that situation. On the other hand, if you're a Muslim woman looking at America, we quote in the book Queen Rania from Jordan, says many Muslim women looking at America think American women are desperate housewives seeking sex in the city. Right. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And of course, in the Muslim world and in the Arab world, especially, so many American films are seen as portraying Arabs and Muslims as bad guys, terrorists, are always in a terror context. But the reach of American media is so global that these images have great impact on all these cultures. And how you respond, whether you love or loathe America or a mixture of both, kind of depends on where you're sitting and how it cuts.
Right.
Yeah, but a lot of them feel, as a lot of people in this country feel, that some of these films, they portray us as too permissive, possibly morally bankrupt,
right?
And yet they consume our films more than their own product, don't they?
Right. Well, in the book, one thing we do in one chapter is we go through, again, going back to my point about how it refracts differently. We go through a chapter with 4 women around the world and how they look at American mass culture. One woman is a woman named Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who wrote the book Infidel, and she talks about seeing, actually it was a film Mike made called
Secret
Admirer. It's kind of a high school farce type of movie, I think. But what she saw was boys and girls kissing each other or touching each other or interacting with each other very casually, something that she had never seen growing up as a Muslim in neighboring Somalia. And this had a deep impact on her life. What kind of world is this that's out there? I would like to live in that world instead of the world I live in. So that's one example of a film that was otherwise immemorable to most of us in the American culture, and how it affected her and how she liked it. On the other hand, we have in that same chapter, we have a woman who's the highest-ranking woman from the Iranian regime, the previous regime that was reformist, not even this hardline regime, who was the spokeswoman for the hostage takers that took the American hostages, who talks about exactly what you said. She looks at American culture. It's all about permissiveness and about selfishness and about the individual, and not about God or about the community or about the spiritual life. And she looks at America and says, in effect, this is the great Satan. There's no spiritual life in this country. It's bereft. It's materialism. It's all it is. So it depends on the different ones. And then we have 2 others. I won't go all through all of the details, but Madeleine Albright, also as a mother and woman, as First Secretary of State, looks at films and says, well, sometimes they offend in Kansas as well as Karachi. And then Benazir Bhutto, of course, who was killed in Pakistan running for president, talks about how Pakistan is divided between Muslims who want to join the world and they love American mass culture, and others who think that it's decadent and it's a betrayal of the Prophet. So again, it's a double-edged sword. Is one of the points we try to keep making in the book. It's not just all one or all the other.
I was thinking, movies basically, if you're going to make a good movie, it reflects life in some way, but it reflects life as it is right now, and the movie will be released a year from now. And the character, you build a movie basically, through a story, but the story basically is the characters. So it's how you portray those characters that basically goes into how the story is portrayed.
Yes, sir. I think it was very telling in the book. One of those 4 people that you mentioned, Nathan, she has a quote here. Today the West doesn't have to deploy its armies and naval fleets, only its satellites and TV broadcasts. That is even a deeper threat to Islam.
Right. That was the Iranian woman who was the spokesman for the hostage takers.
I wonder how she feels right now, by the way.
Yeah, really.
And she's a reformer.
Our armies all over the place.
Yeah. How has... It seems like this is a more important issue to tackle than ever, particularly after we're so embedded in Iraq. Is is that a big motivation for writing this book?
You know, when Mike and I, we were talking for years, you know, we would both travel abroad and we'd see this mass influence of, the big influence of American mass culture and wonder why it was not incorporated in thinking about America's role in the world by the foreign policy establishments. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that often, and one time about three years ago we had lunch and said, well, we should look at this more systematically, because it was right at the time of Abu Ghraib, you know,
which, by the way, is the
killings in Iraq. The cover of the book has a painting by Botero about Abu Ghraib, and America's image was completely in the toilet at that time. I mean, it's still not out completely, thanks to Obama. I think he's got some traction for America's image again. But it was in that moment in which we thought, you know, we've got this huge factory that creates images about America, because we're known not only for what we are and what we do, but how we project ourselves. Right. And it was being so low in the esteem of the world by all opinion polls. We thought this would be a good time to write a book about America's image, how it's shaped, how it's formed, how people perceive it, etc. That was really the motivation for the book at that moment. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's hard to sell democracy or even the concept of liberty and freedom if you're not living it, if you're not basically showing it. It's also hard, you know, to portray, you know, every Mexican as a, you know, as a drug dealer or drug, you know, runner, or every Arab, or you know, as being a heavy. I mean, it's just, you know, nobody in the world is going to buy it. I mean, I just don't think you can sell it, and frankly, you know, people are sick and tired of the and this kind of two-face. You know, we say something and we don't live it, and I think that's another issue that I think we captured in the book.
Well, what types of films would you like to see kind of change that perception? I know you talk a lot in the book about a film like Babel being a prime example of the kind of film that we should see more of.
Yeah, I always say, if I can answer first, because I like to use the example of Babel, and I hate to talk about individual films because everyone has a different take on a given film, right? This was too pretentious, or you know, whatever. But the way of seeing, when we use the Babel as an example, it's the way of seeing the film which was so important. That Alejandro González Iñárritu's point that we need to, you know, see the perspective into the lives and the souls of others. You know, we need to portray them as not as cardboard cutouts, but as real characters with real respect and real dignity, just as we would view ourselves. So not as kind of background extras, but as the world that we're really tethered to by globalization, what these anchored, you know, all these different characters. And Babel at least tried to do that with the Japanese character, the Moroccan kids.
Sure.
You know, obviously the stars that were in it, the American stars that were in it as well. And
you know, we're by the way, you know, we're not suggesting that films like Transformers shouldn't be made. You know, that's or any, you know, I mean, you know, I was involved with Terminator. I was involved with RoboCop. You know, I mean, that's not what we're saying. I think that, you know, what we're saying is that when we do it, you know, when we do a film, is that we don't demonize, you know, just and make stock characters out of those who we may have a problem with.
Yeah.
You know?
Now there was a, you know, just films people may be more familiar with, like Spielberg's Munich. You know, did try to show the, you know, kind of what's inside the mind of the, you know, the terrorists in Munich. It wasn't just, you know, the side of the Israeli athletes, for example. Right. And Stephen Gahagan's Syriana, it was a similar type of thing. Anything that shows the motivations through imaginative knowledge, we call it, like literature and cinema, that shows a character and the motivations and the kind of life a person is living. So there's an understanding of other people that are different than us in this world. That's really important in the age of globalization. It's not going to get rid of conflict, obviously.
Yeah. Or, by the way,
conflict based on ignorance.
Yeah, and we don't, you know, we're not advocating that the government suddenly decides, you know, because we're asking them to be a part of the solution. We're not suggesting that they tell Hollywood what movies to make. You know, that's not the That's not the indication in the book, and it's not what we are advocating.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, going on that about the government, though, do you think there was like a tremendous opportunity after 9/11 for Hollywood to try to take a more responsible, make more responsible films in that regard?
I think it's very dangerous for us to say, that we need to tell Hollywood to take a more responsible point of view.
I agree. I was just curious if there was any.
If they don't come to that decision themselves, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do, because for all intents and purposes, for them and for anybody who invests in the movie business, which is, as you know, very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only expensive to make it, but it's expensive to sell it. The key question really, I think, is, they've got to look long term. I mean, they've got to see that what's happening now is that people around the world want to have their own voices felt. The Chinese want to be able to do films about themselves,
mm-hmm.
and they want, they have, 1,200,000,000 people that can go to the movies.
Right.
And that's true around the world. I mean, we happen to be, better at it. We've been doing it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We've created something that was basically handed down to us by people who really knew what they were doing, and we're starting really actually at the beginning of movies through World War II, where the face of America was seen through movies made that starred John Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, the world is changing, and
mm-hmm.
We've got to change with it.
Yeah. One of the things we like to say in the book is that America, because others want to have their own myths and stories on the screen as well as America, this is the part about competing for hearts and minds. And the John Wayne era, in which America could write the script for the world, both in Hollywood and Washington, is no longer there. Now it's a matter of competition.
Yeah, I think you say it in the book. You say for some countries, the worry is not only that the dominance of American mass culture will eclipse its own, but that its damaging power to label others outstrips their own capacity to assert their identity.
Yeah.
I think that's very valuable. But even so, with government's role, this is a very hopeful time, in spite of all the trauma going on throughout the world, because we have Obama in the White House, and he is definitely someone who seems to be cognizant of the importance of restoring our image throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you suggest that he engage the powers behind our popular media to go to the right direction?
Absolutely, I absolutely agree with that. Well, in the book, we have a couple of recommendations. One is what Hollywood itself can do, and what the government can do, and the State Department and public diplomacy. Because there are really two sides to it. One is projecting America's image to the world, and the other is projecting the world to America. And as far as the State Department and the government is concerned, I would like to quote, and I think we quote in the book, the former foreign minister of Germany, Joschka Fischer, who said, the role of a foreign minister was once to represent his country to the world. Now it's to represent his world to the country. In a global world in which we're all linked to each other, it's essential to have that kind of link. And our view is public diplomacy should not just be directed outward in projecting the image of America as a hybrid, plural, cosmopolitan culture of which Obama is the poster child. That's very important in a world in which you have ethnic cleansing or attempts at religious purity and so on. It's a very important message. It's also to project the world inside. And America is, almost nothing is translated these days in books. The mainstream media has gone almost completely national, meaning unless a global crisis erupts quickly like Iran, you have to rush, speaking as a journalist, you have to find spare people around the world to cover the story because you don't have an infrastructure in place. So we need to replace that information about the world and knowledge about the world, and the government's important in providing that through institutions, universities, exchanges, and so on. Even translating books and doing films and other things. Not doing films, but I mean trying to get exposure for foreign films, for example, or exposures for films that are particularly good about America that may not meet the mass market. But the main recommendation for Hollywood is that Hollywood, our concern about Hollywood, mine especially since I'm not in the industry per se, is the incredible insularity of Hollywood. Images are so powerful, but the people who are in many cases, writing the scripts and making the films, have very little experience in life other than having watched TV and movies their whole life.
I sent
so let the creativity take care of itself. It's just that people need to be exposed and educated to what's going on in the world.
Go ahead, Mike.
I sent the book to a couple of people, who run studios, and some of them read it. Others said, "Well, I'll read it over the summer when I have time."
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's not exactly a long book,
right.
And I'm not sure that they're going to ever comment on, what it is, what the message is, or even, for that matter, in some cases, understand it.
Right.
But it's interesting to me because I think, what we want to do is to, at least make sure that we're heard. And, one way to do it, obviously, is to get people to pipe in, and people like you and others who, I've been on, seem to feel the same way as you guys have, indicated you feel. Which is,
I wanted to touch on something Nathan brought up about foreign films. There have been several over the years that I think the American audience watch, especially this latest one, The Stoning of Soraya M., which is very good learning, but, definitely corresponds with what's going on in Iran right now.
Absolutely.
But there's another film several years ago that was nominated actually for Best Foreign Language Film, Paradise Now.
Right, exactly.
About the Palestinian suicide bombers. And I thought that was, just an excellent film, and actually a very well-balanced film. Forget the criticism that came with it, but I thought that was a very well-balanced film of what's going on in Israel right now. And I thought that was a good primer for someone who didn't know what was going on to really, that was a good way to learn what was going on in the situation. I think there's a lot of great foreign films coming from the Middle East that could really enlighten this country.
No, that's a perfect example, because in the book we quote a former director of national intelligence for the CIA, talking about the dead-end mentalities in the Middle East, where things have gotten to the point of where it's zero sum for either side, the Palestinians or the Israelis. No one wants to compromise. And this CIA agent looked at 3 films, Paradise Now, which you mentioned, by Hani Abu Assad, and Steven Spielberg's Munich, and I mentioned before Syriana as well.
Right.
Each one allowed you to step out of your own side of the argument and see, like in the case of Paradise Now, the doubts that were going on in the suicide bombers, the social pressures. It gave you not a cardboard cutout of a terrorist, but the real emotional and experiential and existential issues going on with a person on that side. That's a great example. That's exactly the kind of great empathy that can be created by good filmmakers. That's exactly what
I think so too, and I think it's very important too to be able to be exposed to films that inspire us to look inward and be a little self-critical and humble.
Yeah. In fact, we were having a discussion the other day on that point. Someone was asking, well, what film should be shown on 4th of July about how great America is, right?
Right.
And so we kind of flipped it and said, well, the film you don't want to show is The Green Berets, which was ostensibly a patriotic film.
Oh, God,
but it shows John Wayne being an extremely arrogant American. Everyone else is a cardboard cutout, et cetera, et cetera, versus Gran Torino. So Gran Torino, where you have this crotchety old war veteran, bitter white working-class guy, a neighborhood filled with immigrants, and it shows the frictions, but also the compassion of this man to these strangers that move into his neighborhood. That's America.
Yeah.
That's a film. That's a 4th of July film. So
perfect choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, Mike, your career has been defined by just so many movies that matter and that make a difference, and even a movie like a Terminator 2 or some others that you mentioned earlier. The commonality that they share is a humanity that I find missing from a lot of the popular genre pictures. So I thought it was particularly fitting, but brave of you as well to put out this message in this book. So
yeah.
I'm very thankful that you have. The book is called American Idol After Iraq. You can purchase it here on our homepage. And this being a movie show, I can't let you go without asking about just 2 upcoming projects that you have that excite me very much. Shanghai.
Very much.
Yes, Shanghai, which I know has to be a personal passion for you. What can you tell us about Shanghai?
Well, here's what I can tell you is that Harvey Weinstein bought this project, which I had developed 12 years ago. And he basically paid me a lot of money and said, okay, I'll make this picture someday. And 12 years later, of course, he went to make it. He did not get the cooperation from the Chinese because the plan was to shoot in Shanghai. So part of it was shot in London and part of it was shot in Thailand. Yeah, that had some restrictions on the story. I think Michael Hallstrom's done a really, really good job. Harvey's worked really hard at trying to get the best possible movie that he knew how to do, and he spent an enormous amount of money for that, that kind of picture to put it on the screen.
Yeah.
And for that, I respect Harvey. I mean, for all intents and purposes, once he bought it, despite the fact that my colleague and I were somewhat involved and spent some time in it, it's been a difficult process. I think it'll turn out to be a really good movie.
Oh, it looks fantastic. Yeah.
Now on the other film,
Shutter Island, of course.
That is a terrific film, and I'm really I feel really good about the performances in the movie, and obviously the director and the script. Lita did a great job, with the book, and then Marty's directed, I think, a really wonderful film.